I pledge allegiance
to the flag
to the flag, the United States of America,
and to the
and to the
republic
republic for
which
which
it
it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much, Heidi. Good evening and welcome to the February 12th, 2021 meeting of the Philipstown Planning Board via Zoom. This is, I wouldn't say it's our 12th month because of this, because we took a couple of months off in, I think, March and April. But it feels like it's been more than 12 months. So welcome yet again to Zoom, and thank you again all for your service. I know it is a volunteer service, but sometimes it takes a little bit more time than just being a volunteer. So thank you for that. And Heidi, thanks for the pledge. Let's do a roll call, Cheryl.
Kim Connor.
Here.
Dennis Gagnon. Peter Lewis.
Here.
Laura O'Connell.
Here.
Neil Tillman.
Here.
Heidi Wendell.
Here,
And Neil Zuckerman.
Here. Okay, thank you for that. I want to welcome Cheryl Rocket as the new secretary. I don't even like saying that word anymore. I know that's the formal title, but that probably needs to be excised. It's not a typical phrase used in the business world, secretary, but you are technically the secretary of the planning board, zoning and conservation board. So thank you, Cheryl, for joining us. We look forward to your service. And
Thank you.
that always happens with a forlorn moment. We have to say goodbye to Kelly McIntyre, but she is being, as they say, kicked upstairs. She is now the deputy town clerk. We look forward to her helping and serving this community in broader ways than even she's done with us. Kelly, thank you very much for your service. I know I speak for all of us and say we appreciate you, so thank you very much. Okay, we will start with two pieces of correspondence. I don't know what there is to discuss as much, except to acknowledge that we have them. I don't know if Glenn is on the call, but I personally, having read the Magazzino related one, I was a little unclear exactly what it meant. I don't know if Glenn wants to be a little more explicit with us if he's available, and maybe Cheryl, if he's out there, you can allow him to join us as a participant. I see he's out there, so maybe we can allow
Yes,
Glenn.
I just let him in.
Great. So Glenn, I don't know if you could just provide a little bit more with the modification you're referencing in the end of the first paragraph.
To be honest, I don't have the letter in front of me. I can tell you the I can tell you the substance of it. There was an agreement, a handshake agreement between Mr. Fadden and the folks at Magazzino, Mr. Spano particularly, that Mr. Fadden would sell an additional 5 acres of his property to Magazzino so that it could be incorporated into the Magazzino lands. There came a point when Mr. Fadden had an offer to sell his house, which was at the back of the top of the hill, but the purchaser said he would not buy the house unless he could buy all of the remaining land, including the 5 acres. And Mr. Fadden basically announced to Mr. Spanu that he wasn't going to sell him the land. I think there was a time issue involved in it, but he pulled out of the deal, and we had no choice but to withdraw the application for the lot line adjustment.
And that's in its entirety, yes? That's not, because I guess what I'm trying to get a little more clarity on is that means that everything that was approved is now off the table, or are there other pieces that were approved?
Well, nothing's been approved. The only thing we withdrew was the application for the lot line adjustment, the subdivision application. It does mean that we have to amend our application with regard to the site plan approval, That couldn't be done in time to make this meeting, so we're intending to make the next meeting and show you essentially the same site plan on a smaller footprint.
That's helpful. And I'm not trying to get you to do the whole application before you have the application. Thank you. Any
Right.
questions for Glenn or on this memo? No? Okay, thank you, Glenn. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Oh, Dennis, go ahead. Dennis has got a question. Go ahead, Dennis.
Does that mean that the house is going to be at a different location? That the house that was up
I
in question?
understand exactly what you said, that, trying to, I'll just add before I answer the question directly, in trying to salvage the deal, we did offer to move the house off of that 5 acres and leave it and onto the other piece of property. I expect that we will, to answer your question directly, I expect that the house will be relocated onto the property back nearer to its original location, but management is deciding whether or not they want to do that. And so I'm really awaiting instructions. So I can't say yes or no, but my guess is probably it will be on the site plan.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Glenn. We also received a memo from the attorney representing Hudson Highlands Reserve. Looks like they'll be coming back soon. I don't know if there's anything to add or any people have any questions. Maybe Glenn could answer since he's one of the courtesy copied entities. Anyone have any questions?
There were some unforeseen delays due to some personal circumstances, some business circumstances, some circumstances at Badey and Watson, but we are pursuing the FEIS very diligently now, and we're intending to have an application, or we intend to have our submission ready for, I think he said the April meeting in that letter.
Well, the good news, Glenn, is there's not much going on before the planning board these days. So we look forward to taking on some more work.
Okay. I'll do the best I can.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions? Okay, let's move on. Thank you very much for that. Let's move on to the public hearing. Kim, I think you're my fill-in for this one. You're on mute. You're still on mute. Kim, you're still on mute. Kim, I see your mouth moving, but you're on mute. Still up mute.
I know. I'm
Okay.
trying to be a good citizen. I'm sorry.
All right, I'm gonna recuse myself now.
Cool. Okay. So, Cheryl, typically the secretary would read the public hearing notice, which is on the agenda.
Okay. Philipstown Planning Board Public Hearing, February 18th, 2021. The Philipstown Planning Board for the Town of Philipstown, New York will hold a public hearing on Thursday, February 18th, 2021, starting at 7:30 p.m. via Zoom to hear the following appeal. If you would like to attend, please email kmcintyre@philipstown.com to request login information before 7 p.m. on February 18th, 2021. Alice Curtis Desmond and Hamilton Fish Library, 472 Route 403, Garrison, New York. Tax map number 71.6-1-12 and 71.6-1-13. Applicant seeks to install a ground-mounted solar ribbon array integrated with the landscape's natural topography. We would also like to create a discovery path to provide community members welcoming and ADA accessible outdoor walkways and opportunities to learn about the habitats that occur naturally on the library's property, as well as solar energy and design. At said hearing, all persons will have the right to be heard. Copies of the application, plat map, and other related materials may be seen in the office of the Planning Board at the Philipstown Building Department, dated at Philipstown, New York, January 21st, 2021.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So I guess the first thing here is I'd like to go to Ron to see if he has any comments before the public hearing.
Okay, The project's been before you in the past. You've made necessary referrals. So it was at this point that you were ready for a public hearing. It's just a matter of getting through that hearing, understanding if there's any public concerns that you haven't identified, and otherwise closing the public hearing and moving it towards an action.
Steve, do you have any remarks?
No, it's pretty straightforward as far as the site plan goes. Just receive comments from the public, see if the board members have any questions or comments, and hopefully you can close the public hearing tonight.
Okay, so we'll have the board members ask questions after the public asks questions. So at this point, is there anyone who would like to speak from the public? Please raise your hand in the Zoom conference, and Cheryl or Kelly will let you in. Anybody? I do not see any hands raised. Do you see any, Cheryl?
Sorry, I was on mute. I just let Ann Borthwick in.
Okay, so go ahead.
Good evening. I'm the next door neighbor to the library property. Hi. It's good to see my library neighbors here as well, Anita and Jen. I want to clarify, I wasn't clear from when I read the notice of the public hearing whether this was only to do with the discovery path or was to do with the solar ribbon as well. Is it both?
It's for both, yes.
Okay. So I have to confess, if I was absolutely, being truly honest, I wish to goodness none of this was happening because I love that open space. It was part of the reason that we moved here or were attracted to 9D and the opportunity to move here in 2012. But I also understand the goals of the library in creating this. I have to confess, I'd like to know more about how we are finally going to have the ribbon and whether it's going to need to be fenced and all of the issues to do with that, because much as it sounds beautiful as the idea of a ribbon going through the property, the images I see do not appeal to me for what I think of as a semi-rural space. It looks more semi-industrial to me, which I regret. But I do have, I'm sure there's a whole series of issues to be resolved there. I think the discovery path is a great idea. I think the opportunity to make it more, the space more navigable than it is currently, because it's very rough and filled with potholes and dangerous things if you want to walk out there. I have one request. In the plan, as I've seen it, and I'm not sure on the specifics quite where it is in relation to our property, there is a stopping place on the eastern side nearer the further end from the library, with the notion that there's some point of interest there, an artwork or something, that it would be a place to stop. By my estimation, it is aligned basically with our back terrace, which is just through the trees from where that would be. And I'm kind of hoping that maybe we can negotiate a location for it that would make it less likely to have people sitting there listening to us or us listening to people who are choosing to stop at that point. It's my one request.
Okay. Anything else?
Not from me.
Okay. Do we have anyone else who's put their hand up who wants to speak? I don't see anyone. Do you see anyone, Cheryl? No.
Yes, there's a lot. There's a Fred Osborne coming.
Oh, okay.
There he is.
Yes, Kim, I'm a member of the board of the Desmond Fish Library. I want to speak in support of this proposal. I think it is a wonderful way to use the additional acreage that the library has to provide a public demonstration of how to incorporate some renewable energy infrastructure into the landscape in an attractive and demonstrable way. I just, it's nice to have completely untouched wilderness, but it's also nice to have well designed and carefully orchestrated infrastructure that shows how it can be incorporated nicely and actually create what some consider a work of art with this design for a walking path connected to a ribbon of solar panels. So I would just like to say that I think the design is superb and the board has worked hard on it. Our consultant has been terrific and I recommend that it be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who's next?
We have the Copelands.
You're on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
Cut that down. Thanks, Fred, for this is going to be very close. So I appreciate the time that's been put into it. So I think our questions are the maintenance of the panels. If there's been enough, if there's enough thought about who's going to maintain them and how they keep them in good condition. I'm just hoping that's all been included in the thought that's been put into this.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Who's next?
Crystal Ford.
Hi.
Answer.
Hi, you can hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. I just really want to throw my support behind the library project. I got to see the drawings, I want to say it was 2 years ago now when they were going through the different proposals. And I really think this is well thought out. It's beautiful. It really is, the library is showing us the way because we need to be leaders and we have a climate crisis, right? And we need to start really thinking about how in our own backyard we're going to be addressing these challenges. And I think the library is doing it in such a thoughtful manner. And so I just wanted to voice my support for the project. That's it.
Thank you. Who's next?
Paul Thompson.
Hello?
There he is.
You're on mute, sir. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to say, I need to ask you all to identify yourself and where you live.
Okay, this is Paul Thompson, a new resident to Cold Spring, having previously lived just down the road in Peekskill. I've got quite well acquainted with the area. I do a lot of running in and around the local roads and lanes, and I'm quite familiar with the library. Like Crystal as well, I'm very active. Well, I like to think I'm very active with the Climate Smart Philipstown group. Certainly will be in the future. I love the proposal. I think it's very low impact, very tasteful, very reminiscent of the gates that were in Central Park, I think in 2005, if you remember that those miles and miles of orange flags. I think it's very important that significant public buildings such as libraries do lead the way and set an example. And I think with this project, they're doing just that. So complete support from my side, and thanks for listening to me, and apologies for some of the issues for me joining just at the outset.
No worries. Thank you. Cheryl, who's next?
I don't see any more hands at the moment. That's it.
So, sorry, this is just more complicated because of Zoom. So I think that's it. So at this point, we close the public hearing and then we have a discussion, Steve?
Well, you could, but what we usually do is to ask the board if they have any comments and include that as part of the public hearing. It's not strictly speaking necessary, but it's just pretty much our practice and procedure.
Perfect. So does anyone from the board have any comments?
I do, Cam, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
Jump right in. I think we're going to be hard pressed to find anybody who's opposed to this. I think it's a great project. I think it's well thought out. Definitely has a lot of support. What I'm curious about is, and we've mentioned that this is the first, I think, of this type of project that we've had locally. I'm interested in, is there a mechanism in place where we can get feedback after the fact? So is there, I would like to see, maybe, I don't know, maybe it has to come back to the building inspector, maybe it has to come back to Nat Prentice and the conservation board, or the comprehensive plan. But I'm interested, I think there's a lot of good information available about projects like this in a year or in 2 years, or what can they tell us about, the return on investment? Is it easy to maintain? Are you having any problems? How's it going? I mean, did you feel like it was a good project and that it was worth it? And I don't know that mechanism exists just yet, but I think it's important that we move forward with projects like this, but I also think it's good to have an avenue for some feedback so that we can learn. As it's new technology, it's a new type of thing. And again, I mean, we can always have I could have follow-ups with Tim Rasick and just say, well, how's it going with that? But I'd like to hear feedback about how this went down the road. And I don't know that we have that open yet, or just, let's communicate, let's talk, how'd it go, Sorry. That's it.
Okay. So my comment on that, we did have Crystal Ford on just a minute ago, and she is the Climate Smart coordinator for Philipstown. So it seems to me that's probably the subgovernmental entity that would be interested in tracking this kind of thing.
Okay, good.
So that might be, I don't know, we could perhaps send a memo to the town board saying that we are interested in following up, and would that be an appropriate thing to ask the Climate Smart task coordinator, I don't remember what the title is, to do?
Yeah, it'd be nice to have it'd be nice to, a lot of effort went into this, a lot of money's going into it. I mean, I'm sure in a year, 2 years down the road, they might have some things that could help us do more of this and make sure we don't, tune it as it goes through the process. Thanks, Kim. That's it for me.
Anybody else? No? So I have one question. Ron had mentioned in his memo that there's nothing in this plan related to lighting. So I wanted to ask the question about, what the plan is for lighting, and can we see that? If there's no lighting, that's fine. If, then there's nothing to submit, but presumably there might be some, or if it's not something you've thought about yet, it might be something you do want to think about.
Right now, there's not a plan for lighting on the walking paths and on the solar project. Laura, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
At this point, and it hasn't been conceived to have outdoor lighting, at least around the discovery path. The idea is to allow the site to operate as closely as it can to what it does without light disturbance, and also being sensitive to neighbors and other things like that. So in the phases of the project that are forward now, which is the discovery path and the ribbon, there's no lighting.
Okay, so it's basically a dawn to dusk kind of thing and nothing happening.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So if no one else has any comments, I will take a motion to close the public hearing. Heidi has her hand up. Peter has his hand up to second. All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. Any abstentions? Motion passes. So thank you, everybody. So the next step here would be to, I didn't think I'd remember this, but the next step here would be to Steve.
Well, normally what you do at this point is kind of go around the table and see if anybody has any additional comments preparatory for an approval resolution. I know the library's neighbor, I apologize, I'm blanking on her name, had requested a minor tweak to the site plan. I don't know whether the board's interested in pursuing that or not. But in the event that the board or Ron perhaps has any other comments about how to finalize the site plan, get it ready for the resolution, this would be the time to have those discussions.
Okay. So what do we think about, does anyone have any comments on that, on what Steve just said? About possibly asking the library.
With the site plan, you're not happy with the site plan, is there anything else you want to see? I mean, that's basically what we should chat about.
Thanks, Steve. Sorry. Dennis.
Yeah, Steve had mentioned in the first speaker about that privacy issue. I pulled out the drawings. I haven't really had a chance to open them up again regarding that like spot where people might be stopping that adjoins this person's terrace. Me living close to a road, I could be very concerned with a privacy issue like that. So if the library is okay with tweaking that plan a little bit and taking into consideration their neighbors and their privacy, I think that would be the way to go.
Anyone else? Any other comments?
I sort of agree with that, Kim. Thanks, Dennis. Jen, does that, I mean, I know you just heard the comments from the public, but does that sound like there's something you could work around?
I think I'm trying to picture the plan in front of me, and I actually don't have it right in front of me, but I think that was a point of interest that was undefined. So I think that it's something that we could potentially move to another location, or just move. I mean, it wasn't a completely thought out piece of that plan. I think it was sort of a spot that could have a place to stop. But it's certainly something that we could either skip over or move to another place along the path. So
okay,
I think there's some flexibility there.
Be nice to give it a look. I mean, she did take the time to show up at the public hearing. Sounds like a reasonable request. Let's see.
And she's our neighbor, and
yeah,
we have relationships with our neighbors. So.
Yeah, you figure it out. Yeah.
Dennis?
Yes, consideration maybe further looking at it, maybe some screening, possibly some plantings to be considered.
Okay. Anybody else? Heidi, I see you have your mute off. Right? Do you have anything you want to say?
No, I just forgot to unmute myself again.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I think it's a great project. But I don't have anything specific.
Okay. So in that case, Steve, if we want to have, ask for a little more time.
I think that the applicant would appreciate it, notwithstanding it's only February, if we could have a approval resolution for March. I don't know, Ron, is that something that's going to be doable if they're going to do some minor changes in regard to the neighboring property?
That could easily be accomplished. I can have the necessary resolutions done. I will also work directly with Jen to make sure a resubmittal comes in that addresses that one concern of the public.
Okay. So in that case, if no one else has anything else to say, perhaps we can make a motion, have a motion to ask Ron to prepare those resolutions for our March meeting.
I make the motion.
Heidi first, Laura second. Anybody, sorry, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the motion passes. So thank you all. And I will turn this back over to Neil Zuckerman, who is a Zoom expert.
Oh, well, I'm not a Zoom expert, but I am an expert in hiring vice chairs. So phenomenal job, Kim. You knew, Steve, I was going there. Good job. All right, so we'll move to Mark Conn's application. As you may recall, we had scheduled a public hearing, which we did not attend because there were 2.5 feet of snow. There will be more snow. And
Not a public hearing, a site visit.
Thank you, site visit. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'd like to discuss, and we can get through some the issues at hand, but I do think that first order of business is discussing whether we want to try to visit or try to visit again the site. I'll go around the room and see how people feel about that, balancing expediency with due process and the appropriate review of the application. So thoughts from the board about having the site visit rescheduled when we actually can walk the terrain.
I would go for that. I would be in favor of that.
Me too.
I would as well.
Okay, anyone?
I'm okay with that.
All right. So, I mean, I will have to say, we're not going to get to it until, and we'll get to this in another application. We're just not going to be able to get there until we get a little less snow. And we got, last I looked, there was a couple of feet still in a lot of places. My backyard has got 3 feet on the deck. So we're going to have to wait till it warms up. And so it doesn't mean we can't keep processing the conversation, but that's something we're going to have to do. I will make an editorial remark for a second. I did a training 2 or 3 weeks ago, somewhere between the last meeting and this one. Turns out, at least, and Steve Gabb will probably like to fight with this gentleman who gave the training. He was a lawyer from somewhere way upstate. Apparently, it is not required to notice a site visit. That is not, according to this gentleman who was hired by the New York State Planning Federation to do the training, that is not actually required. That it is a public meeting, a site visit. A whole interesting conversation. I know he said most planning boards do it as a matter of course, but it's technically not obliged to be a public meeting nor to be noticed. I think it's a good process. I like that we do that. I think it's a good opportunity for the public. But I just want to share that little bit of training I had received. And I'll send you the deck the gentleman put together for it, Steve. So we're going to reschedule it. I'm going to guess even putting one on the calendar now for the next 3 weeks is not going to be very practical. I just don't imagine it's going to warm up and melt the snow enough between now and our next meeting. Does anyone feel like we should try and schedule it now, or should we push it off to after the next meeting, when I think by the time the end of March comes around, we'll have navigability? Thoughts?
I'm optimistic that maybe we could schedule one and then just have to cancel it. But that may just be me.
Send them into the group, others?
Look, this is Bob Flaherty. I visited the site myself a couple weeks ago. What if they just plowed the driveway so that everyone can get up there? And once you're at the top of the driveway, you can see everything at that particular point. Maybe the stakes are too low now with the snow covered. I don't know about that. That might be the only thing. But if you're on top of the driveway, you can see everything from one location. Just a thought, because we want to hold the applicant up.
Yeah, we're trying to balance speed with process. So thoughtful point, Bob. I don't know what the site is small, so maybe we can see it all from one vantage point. I don't know how much walking it deserves or needs. Most of our site visits, we walk the terrain. So thoughts, group, anyone else?
Neil, I sort of agree with Kim and Bob. I think we should schedule it for next month. Let's keep moving along. I went by there the other day. They've got a nice driveway set in. I think we can access the property. And
any counter views on those 3 points? Okay, Steve, do I need a motion to schedule the site visit?
We always have motions to schedule it, not necessarily for the date. but to schedule it, yes.
Can I have a motion then to schedule a renewed site visit, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Peter. Second, Kim. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, excellent. Cheryl, so let's look at the calendar, and this will require some noticing, Cheryl, that I'm sure Kelly will help you with. March 7th gives us a little bit of time to maybe there'll be some sun at some point, and if not, we'll to the point we can walk up the driveway.
March 7th is not great for me, but that's okay.
Others?
I'm good with the 7th.
I'm good.
Fine.
Okay. I think we got a quorum then. So 7th, so let's do 7th, March 7th at 9:30 a.m.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that order of business. So Ron, take us where we need to go on this application, please. What is open for us to attend to?
Yeah, okay, it is a minor project. The prior meeting, you declared it a type 2 action pursuant to seeker, so you concluded your seeker responsibilities. I think the few significant items to be cognizant of when you do your sidewalk is just that it lies almost entirely within the scenic protection overlay zone, which obviously carries with it specific, it raises issues over visibility and enhanced landscaping. Relative to that, the applicant has proposed a very significant landscaping plan. So as the board conducts their walk, you should be aware of the enhancements they're proposing to reflect that. And it's also contains areas of steep slopes, but based on my review of the plans, it appears that all steep slope considerations have been satisfied. Other than that, it's just a matter of getting the sidewalk done and then making a determination whether you wish to have a public hearing or not, because it's discretionary in this case.
Okay, and Ron, maybe for the group, can you just describe what are some of the, well, let me ask this. Are most of the scenic protection or all the scenic protection overlay requirements within the plan? Are there pieces that are not?
Well, I tried to, you do have a technical memo from my office, and that should be in front of you. And I've tried to highlight the 3 or 4 significant items that may pertain. For the most part, I think they've been satisfied, but you want to just see it for yourself to see if you want to consider any additional enhancements. There is one residence to the south that you may just want to recognize. Again, they are offering landscaping improvements in that area. You just want to be aware of that.
Steve, anything to add?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. You hold your site visit. I guess there is one thing to add. Ron is right that it is a discretionary public hearing. I can tell you, however, that unless it's a resubmission or something which is very, very clearly non-controversial, this board has traditionally held the discretionary public hearing in any event.
Yeah, and my sense is that's appropriate given the couple of pieces, but we can cross that bridge when we get there after our site visit. Questions from the board?
I think the applicant may wish to speak to the board tonight as well.
Oh, let's do that. That'll make it easier to ask questions. So who is, Jason, are you here to speak for them?
Maybe I can speak. I'm the architect, and we have our landscape designer and Jason Snyder, as you mentioned. So we just wanted to share that we have been addressing some of the planting questions that have been raised and have elaborated a bit more on our planting plans, which I think you've seen in our submissions. The other thing that we wanted to ask the board's consideration is because we're in the zone where there's the potential for northern long-eared bats, and there's a general prohibition or additional DEC requirements or specifications for cutting down trees after March 31st. We wonder if the board would consider allowing us to, we've identified very specific trees that would need to be removed for this project. We wonder if the board might consider an early approval to remove those trees before March 31st so that we can be in full, compliance with the DEC rules.
Yeah, if I can speak to that for just a second for the board. The tree removals that are being discussed are specifically in the area where the house is proposed and or the sanitary disposal system. There's no other general clearing being proposed on the site. And as I think has been mentioned before, the driveway has already been cut in. So there's no tree removals necessary for the completion of that item. So it's really relative to just the construction of the house itself and a sanitary disposal system, which has been approved by the county health department already. Thank you.
Anything else from the applicant?
I should just also note that if there is any question about when the site visit comes, we're happy to improve stake heights and that sort of thing if needed to accommodate the site visit. So,
Mr. Conn, did you want to say something? Or sorry, Jason, go ahead. No? Okay, Steve, go ahead.
That covers it.
Oh, okay. Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Just, do they need the resolution approving the clearing before the site plan's approved this month, or is next month okay?
I
think the meeting next month is going to be on the 18th as well. That would leave them something shy of 2 weeks to accomplish the tree removals. And it's only felling the trees. They're not going to grub the site specifically.
Right. So it's just clearing, not grading. But so you're satisfied that if the board holds its site walk, takes a look, is willing to adopt a resolution next month, that'll be timely. There's no problem.
Well, it's for the applicant. David, is that sufficient time for you to get your contractor on board?
I think that we should be able to accommodate. We definitely would love if it could be sooner, but I also recognize if you need to see the trees in person, that's perfectly fine too. And I think it's cutting it close, but I think we should be able to work with that, and we appreciate it a lot.
Okay, board member questions? Peter, go ahead.
I just had one question, and it has to do with the northern long-eared bat and the trees, and who's responsible for that? Because we're going to be running into it with the HVS F as well. Is that the DEC that deals with that?
Yeah, it's a DEC guideline. Typically, when it impacts a project that comes before your board, we insist that those conditions or requirements be identified specifically on plan. So the board and the applicant are completely aware of those limitations.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just so everybody understands, I'm sure you do, but just to make sure, what's going on is the bats are hibernating now. And the concern is that when they come out of hibernation, they may go into areas where these trees are standing and use that as habitat. And if the trees were cut down, it would disturb the bats. But if you cut them down now before the bats are out of hibernation, then you really minimize any impact, because if the trees aren't there, they aren't going to roost in them. So that's what's going on. If the trees go down now, it won't harm the bats. If they wait until after whatever date it is there in April, they can't cut them down until next November, I think it is when you start again. So they lose a whole year as far as construction goes.
The bats aren't hibernating in the trees, right? They hibernate somewhere else.
Yeah, usually in caves.
Other questions?
Yeah, so to go back to the question that was given to David. So it would make sense if we could waive, right? So approve so that the trees could be removed now, because you would need more time to mobilize the contractor. So is there any risk in us just agreeing to the trees without seeing them? Because either way, the trees would have to be removed either way if we're approving this, because it's in the place of the septic and of the location of the house.
Well, the risk is that you may not want those trees removed. If you go and you take a look and they're old growth trees and you don't feel that they should be cut down and you want the building envelope moved or the septic site moved, once you've authorized the trees to get cut down, they're going to get cut down. And it kind of leaves you with a fait accompli as to the building envelope and the septic.
How many,
If
how
I,
many,
Mr. Conn, Mr. Conn, if you've got something to share on that specific topic, please. And you're on mute, sir.
Sorry, for the past year, I've gone to the lot, which is small. For a solid year, I've walked it and gone there on the weekends and looked for where the house can go. If I could not remove one single tree, I wouldn't. I love the lot. It is beautiful, and I don't want not one single tree removed. And David and I, when I finally got in touch with David, we designed the home to try to go around the trees. That's why it's U-shaped. I love the trees and I don't want to remove any of them. So I promise you that if I'm correct, all the large trees, we're totally going around. So I'm very mindful of the trees. That's all I will say. If the property could not be touched at all or nothing removed, that's what we would do. So
yeah, just to sort of emphasize what Mark's saying, that I was about to sort of highlight the fact that we've tried to be extremely selective about the trees we're removing. There's one tree that's slightly larger, and it's not a particularly healthy tree. All the rest of them are not tiny trees, but they're smaller. And we've very specifically identified exactly which trees we're removing in our site plans, both in the Badey Watson plan and the planting plan. So it just to emphasize what Mark's saying, we've been extremely mindful and have kind of gone out of our way to protect as many trees as possible, and hope that really shows in our plan.
Can I just add one thing to that? I believe that the DBHs of the trees are identified in the survey, and that will show that they're the smaller DBH trees.
Thank you. Kim, you had something you want to ask?
I was just going to ask how many trees there are.
Good question.
12, is that correct, David? There's 12.
13, actually.
13, sorry.
Okay, other questions?
I do have one more question, which doesn't have anything to do with trees.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to confirm that there was some discussion last time about whether or not the neighbor that's above, whether their septic might affect your well. So I just wanted to confirm that, there's enough distance and
Yes, ma'am. When they laid that subdivision and all the plots, and they had the original septic tanks and wells all mapped out, and even if the ranch family decided to do another septic tank, to make sure I'm in the clear. And so that was already on the original plan when it was originally subdivided.
right. So it meets the current code.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
That's really the question, because the subdivision could have happened a very long time ago. Current code, if the county approval.
Other questions?
Neil, I'm gonna jump back to the trees. Steve, if we're doing the site visit on the 7th, which I guess, which is a public meeting, is there any way, maybe we could split the difference on this? Would it be possible for us to make a call on the trees at the site visit on the 7th and give them approval? At that point, that'll give them another 10 days or something to get the trees out.
The site visits are kind of like workshops. I mean, they're really not something the board's ever taken affirmative votes on and action on an item. I guess technically, since it's a public meeting and the board's assembled with a quorum, you could do it.
Because I was thinking we'd ask the applicant to put survey tape around the trees. We go up there, we look. If there's no objection, let them move forward.
Legally, you could do it if that's what you want to do. But I mean, If the board's satisfied that the 13 trees aren't old growth trees and that you're not unhappy with the building envelope and where the septic is, I mean, that was what the concern is. I mean, I don't know, maybe Ron has some input on taking down these trees, but if you're satisfied it's not an issue, I mean, you could approve it right now. But then again, if you want to go and see them in person, you might want to put it off till next month. That's what you're weighing.
Didn't Neil just tell us that those are not public meetings?
Well, Neil said you didn't have to notice them. I don't know that I agree with that. I kind of hope that he's right because it would make life easier.
I'll send you the stuff. You can fight with the lawyer who gave this training. Regardless, that's what we do, and we've been doing that for a long time. So look, Ron, are there any issues related to these trees with the scenic protection overlay? Are there any additional measures that overlay provides for trees, for example?
As I say, the overall intent of it is to minimize tree removals, as the board can appreciate. Just for the board's benefit, you've run into this issue before on projects that came before you a few years ago. And it's not a matter that you've ever taken a formal approval in advance of a site plan approval. What the board winds up doing is just issuing notice to the building inspector's office that this issue has arose and you have no objection to tree removals prior to action on the site plan application. So just so you understand what's been done in the past.
So it's the building inspector that gives the permit, not us. So we're just letting the building inspector
Right, you're not
know that
issuing
it's
a
okay
permit
with us.
for it. That's right.
All right, we can take the sentiment of the board. What is the sentiment of the boards? And I think we're to wait to make a decision on these trees until we go see the site. Can I just get a straw poll vote on that, please? Who would like to wait until they see the site to make a decision? 1, 2, 3. I voted with them. That's 4. Okay. So majority of the board would like to wait until we see the site. And I think, at least for me, Mr. Conn, I feel that way as a matter of precedent. I don't want to start approving things before I see them. I apologize for the snow. It's not my fault, of course, but I guess we could have all taken out our snowshoes. So I like Neil Toman's approach. I think that's a smart move. We'll have a quorum for our site visit. We will decide then and there, and then we will issue a note to or a communication to the building inspector to say A-OK. Is everyone okay with that approach? Okay. Anything else on the Conn property? Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll next move to 3622 Route 9.
Moving Adam over.
Okay, Adam, you have the floor.
Good evening. Thanks for having us back. Adam Thyberg from Insight Engineering Surveying Landscape Architecture PC. I'm also joined tonight by Keith Schofield of LMV Architects, who worked on the architectural elevations that were provided with this submission. So just to touch on the highlights of the items that have been updated since last you saw this project. One is the tree survey that was requested was provided. The SWIP was provided, so we've detailed out both in plan and by way of the SWIP the details of the drainage system that we're proposing. And of course, we provided the elevations, which we just saw. And I will bring Keith in. I'm sorry, Cheryl, is Keith in the meeting? Keith Schofield?
I let him.
I'm here. Oh, okay. So just to just to touch on those few items. Obviously, getting a look at what the building was going to look like was a priority for the board. So we're here tonight to certainly answer any questions with regard to the site, the drainage that we've detailed out a bit more, and the architecture. Obviously, I'll leave the architecture to Keith to discuss. And in addition to any questions that we can answer or comments that we can respond to, we'd also like to formally request that a public hearing be scheduled for the March meeting.
Sorry, anything more? Are you done, sir?
I'm happy to
Oh.
respond to any questions.
Okay, well, Ron, weigh in, please.
Sure. Board has a technical memo from my office reviewing the latest plan submittal. Previously, you've conducted a coordinated environmental review. The 30-day comment period has long since expired, so you now can acknowledge yourself to be lead agency pursuant to seeker. So whenever you believe you have sufficient information in which to act, you can consider making a seeker declaration. Procedurally, as the applicant indicates, a public hearing would be next on the project. The most significant issues that came out of the board's prior sidewalk was just the massing size of the buildings and therefore the attendant interest in the architectural views, what the elevations of the buildings would look like. Also the issue relative to the properties to the rear. There's a residentially developed property immediately adjacent to this parcel to the east. And the board had raised issues relative to additional or enhanced screening to protect those properties. But the significant issue I think that discussed tonight is just your view of the architectural plans. Again, recognizing the front of the building faces Route 9. The rear of the building actually faces the residential properties to the east. My initial thoughts, the buildings themselves, I think the maximum heights they're identifying are 20 feet to the top of those peaks that you see. But the rears of the buildings are pretty basic. I don't know if the board has any view to see if that can be enhanced or improved in any way relative to their potential visibility to properties to the east. So I turn it back to you.
I could just address that just quickly. So the building that you're seeing here, that is the front-facing building, the building that runs along the frontage of Route 9. As Ron pointed out, the kind of more articulated portion of the building is what will face Route 9. This would be what's facing in the back. And again, I'll let Keith speak more to the details of the architecture, but as it refers to the site, as Ron was mentioning, we do have neighbors to the rear. That being said, we have another building behind there, and we also have gone in some detail. We've made some adjustments to the site plan, pulled these buildings a little further out of the existing tree line to maintain as much of a vegetative screen as possible in that area. So I just wanted to point that out as we move along.
Keith, did you want to add anything as the architect?
Sure. What we look to do on the building that you're looking at right now, on the Route 9 facade, we're looking to introduce, a heavier masonry looking base to anchor the building to the ground. Along with that would be the storefront entry doors and storefront windows that would provide, not only visibility from the street, but also, the natural light and for the spaces that the client who rents this space would be looking to achieve. Each entranceway also is protected by an aluminum awning. So each doorway has the protection out to the sidewalk. Each entranceway is also enhanced with a brick veneer facade that kind of helps define the entrances along with the aluminum overhangs. In between each of the darker shaded brick veneer that you see is a board and batten to kind of help bring the warmth of a wood material into the elevation. So it's going to break up the facades a little bit. And, it's in keeping with a lot of the current trends for materials. So, just trying to add a little street appeal. The side elevations which also show a little bit of the same facade material in the front wrapping the corner. Kind of helps create an anchor for each corner. And then the building will transition into an aluminum metal wall panel, and that'll continue around the rear. And the rear, we kept basically, since it didn't face the street, a sort of a minimal approach where we're providing each tenant an overhead door and a man door to get in, but we didn't want to start throwing additional windows and everything as anything that's not visible from Route 9. We weren't trying to encourage the ability to look in and, eliminate the risk of any mischievous activity that could go along with that. On the rear building, so building number 2, also a pre-engineered building. This is looking to basically be divided in half. So as you see, the top elevation there shows 2 sets of entry doors. You would have a demising partition between those 2 entry doors that would separate one tenant from the other. So the next elevation below that would be very typical from the north and the south, allowing each tenant to have an overhead door for equipment, and also the windows that you see not only on the sides but also in the top elevation. That would be for more of the office spaces. That would be for organizing and running the business out of that space. Again, the facades that face the east, minimal attention to windows or anything like that. To one, because it's not seen from the street. Don't encourage, mischievous activity that could happen with an opening on that side.
And with regard to material, Keith, I believe we had spoken with the applicant about kind of neutral earth tone type colors,
Yes.
which we can provide more information on with our next submission.
Absolutely. They're looking at earth tones, or even if we get into the gray families, light grays, dark grays, anything that's going to keep us in a desirable feel for what today's client is going to want to rent.
Is it possible then that you could provide colored renderings of those architecturals for the board's next meeting?
Yes, I'll apply color to those.
And also provide color swatches?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, Ron, besides that, anything else to add?
Again, we've provided some technical comments for the applicant to consider. Statutorily, the project requires a public hearing, as the applicant has indicated. So if the board is otherwise ready to do so, you can consider scheduling a public hearing, unless you want further information on these architecturals.
Okay, board members, questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Are you, I can't remember if Ron covered this in the technical memo, but are you cutting down the trees on the south side of the property?
Not all of the trees along the south side of the property. Are you talking about this area in particular?
I guess so. I mean, I can't really tell from those, little fuzz balls.
Yeah.
Are those the trees that because they certainly were not in a straight line. So I'm just wondering, I mean, was a significant clump of trees, very large evergreen trees. And I can't remember what the size of the deciduous trees was, but the evergreens were really big.
Yeah, I believe that there are some evergreen trees maybe a little further up into the site. I believe this stretch is more kind of a vine covered, kind of an invasive deciduous section. In order to accommodate the stormwater attenuation that's required as part of the DEC general permit, the sizing the stormwater basin required that, and to the board's point at the at the site visit, realistically, those were not going to make it. That being said, we've looked, and just generally with the plantings on the site, we've looked to, where we have had to make removals. We are looking to screen the property along the property line with evergreen trees, which these along here and around the other portions of the perimeter represent, while also mixing in a good variety of shade and understory trees, a lot of native shrubs, pollinator species, perennials, and not to mention the seed mixes and so on that will contain a variety of native perennials. So we've looked to put back better than what we're taking out. The plantings that we're showing here are completely native plantings, and we believe that this will function ecologically better than what's there, as the majority of what is on the site now is a lot of invasive species and so on. So we're looking to replace what we're taking out in a conscientious and constructive way. But yes, to answer your question, the trees that are in this area, they would be removed and replaced with a dense screen of native evergreen trees.
Adam, I mean, the board fully can appreciate that tree removals are necessary, but as the members indicating, there's significant removals necessary for almost the entire site, given that you're working border to border and the size of the stormwater facilities necessary to address your change in impervious or runoff. Could you pull up the plan that you have for the tree removals so the board can better appreciate the extent of removals going on?
Yes. So the trees in here, we were showing a stormwater basin in this area. This is more the middle of the site that we were walking in, where there's not a lot of tree cover. We're maintaining, as much as we can along the perimeter here, and out and along here, but there is a significant portion. You can see these are mostly, the Norway maples and so on that are in this area where we would be putting stormwater basins. So those ones with the X's would be the ones that would be removed. And again, these are the 8-inch caliper trees.
Other questions?
So the numbers on those trees they're more than 8-inch, some of them are 18-inch, some are 12-inch.
8-inch and up, yes.
Yeah, and you're clear cutting essentially. Can you tell me why the stormwater basins have to be so large?
Yeah, as part of the state stormwater regulations for what we're looking to do, you need to accommodate or attenuate your peak flows in an extreme event to make it so that any water that in such an extreme event that leaves the site is as much or less than the existing condition. So the size of the basins is to accommodate the stormwater.
Because there's so much impervious surface, correct? Like if your impervious surface were smaller,
it is tied to impervious surface, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask another question about those stormwater basins. There's a restaurant next door. There are children in the parking lot. You're removing pretty much all the screening. What kind of safeguards do you have to put into these stormwater basins so that children don't, for example, find them an attractive nuisance and end up in?
Yeah, I think the primary concern, obviously would be, for when there's water in them, and these are not going to be wet for much time. There'll be intermittent periods where there will be water in these. We'd prefer not to have to fence them in or anything like that, just for the aesthetic. But
I'm just asking what the safeguards are, like what requirements there are. That maybe that's something wrong. You can tell us about at some point. So that's one question. The building in the front is extremely large and covers almost the entire lot. And I have a question about it looks like it goes into where there's an easement for a shared driveway. Now, I know that the owner of this property also owns the owner next door, owns the property next door, but where does that easement sit? You know, does the owner have to extinguish the easement? Does the easement run with the land regardless of who owns it?
Yeah, so this is a shared easement. I think the beneficiary is reciprocal on either side of the line. And I'll have to clarify that. That's a good question. But
Because you're
again,
planting trees in there as well.
Again, the owner it's the same owner across the property line. So if that did need to be modified, that could be done.
Okay. So the building in the front, 3 kinds of siding: masonry, brick face, and aluminum.
It could either be aluminum or it could be cementitious, like a hardy material.
Like a hardy plank kind of
Yes.
thing. And in the back, there doesn't seem to be much of a relationship between the second building and the first building.
Actually, the metal panels will actually be the same color scheme. So as you get past the brick veneer on the front corners and it changes over to metal, the same feel will go towards the back.
Seems like the
building.
architectural style is different though, correct?
Well, it's only different in the sense that the front building is more of a single pitch to the rear, where the rear building has a slight gable, pitching both east and west.
Okay. We haven't, let's see. We haven't really talked about the hoop house and the salt and the aquifer. I don't know what the board feels about that, but I just want to keep that in mind. I think the last time we talked about this, there was a discussion of whether or not it was going to be possible to have gravel paving inside that fence and whether you would have problems with heavy equipment sinking in bad weather. I'd also like to know if there are going to be any trucks or anything like that parked within these fences, or is it just going to be, you know, is there equipment that's going to be stored in these yards, or is it just material?
There may be equipment kept in the storage spaces along with materials. We did discuss going with a concrete slab within the storage units, which I think we can certainly accommodate. But yes, to answer your other question, yes, there might be some light machinery that might be kept within these storage areas.
Okay, so my question then for Ron and Steve is, you know, given our experience further down Route 9 with parking, you know, trucks that are being worked on, you know, do we need to institute any kind of controls over how much equipment gets parked there, where it's allowed to be parked, that kind of thing, so that we don't end up with a similar situation?
Well, the issue's been raised in the past, but there's been no clear definition from the applicant as to what types of equipment they would consider parking there. I think it's important to have the plans clearly identify what their expectations or hopes are in terms of what would be permitted on those outdoor gravel areas. And then we could determine what's appropriate for either environmental protections or, again, further screening enhancements for the rear.
I agree with Ron 100%. I think it'd be appropriate to have a note specifically denoting what, or delineating what it is going to be done in that area, and the board can impose whatever safeguards it feels is appropriate as conditions of approval.
Okay. So I think that's probably all that I have for the moment. I yield my time to somebody else.
Oh my God. Jeez.
Unbelievable, right? Unbelievable.
Well, yeah, if we start having to allocate time, we're gonna be here really long. So who would like to speak next? Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, oh, Laura, please go ahead.
Sorry, just really quick to Kim's point, just in the nature of like, again, we are talking about the Route 9 corridor. So, I have to say that I'm, guilty of one of the folks who is very, very critical with one of the applicants further south of Route 9. So I would want to know, are we required to also ask the same question with regard to the frequency of the amount of trucks that are coming in and out of the site? And should we be concerned? And if so, are we, do we have the ability to ask for a traffic study? Or do we even know that the entrance, because I know that they have 2 entrances, that the amount of trucks based upon the, their coming and goings, is that enough for the site? I mean, we just don't know, right, at this point?
So if I could just respond, there is going to be a permitting process with the DOT, and a lot of that will be determined through that process and vetted out. With regard to the number of trips, we've included in our statement of use a good amount of data in terms of our anticipated number of tenants, or anticipated number of employees, or anticipated number of trips, both of said employees and of any other trucks or deliveries and that kind of thing. So we've kind of set that, we have some we've provided documentation on that. And then further to that point, with regard to the driveways, that's all going to be vetted through the DOT permitting process. I know that Ron had noted in one of his comments the possibility of doing something with the northern driveway of maybe an exit only, or some other variation on that idea of limiting truck egress to the main driveway, which I guess I have the plan here. So we are all looking at the same thing, limiting truck access to this lane. And again, that's all going to be vetted through the DOT permitting process. But I think, there's certainly possibility of, limiting this access to, whether it's an exit only kind of situation, or if it's it's just for passenger vehicles and trucks are required to use this main route. And that, again, will all be vetted out.
Just to be clear with the board, as Adam's indicating, the applicant has filed a statement of use with you. It made very clear representations in terms of the expected occupancy for the buildings and traffic generation. So the board would be well to review those documents, just to be sure you understand the scope of what's being proposed.
If I could chime in on the DOT issue. The internal circulation of vehicles, as well as the overall traffic impacts of any project, are well within the purview of the planning board. Those are all things that you can consider and ask any questions that you want about, and make sure that you're satisfied that the plan works as far as both internal traffic circulation and overall traffic impacts. Now, their applicant is absolutely correct that they're going to need curb cut approval from the DOT as far as entrance onto Route 9. And I think that the board would be very hard pressed to say that they're going to require something that the DOT won't approve. Having said that, DOT approval is a minimum. And if there's more that you need and you have a basis for requiring more in terms of site distances or whatever it is, you don't have to demur to the DOT on that. You can't require something that the DOT won't approve, but if the DOT you're willing to meet that minimum, you can require additional safeguards if there's a rational basis for it.
Okay, other questions? Okay, I have more of a, I guess, a mix of a statement and a question. So for Heidi and Laura's sake, I know you have not gotten a physical copy yet of the zoning code, which is a real shame on the printing. Kelly and Cheryl have to get you a copy, but obviously the zoning code is available online. It is important, particularly for this incident, this application, relative to similar ones, like when the first round with Magazzino, that we talk about, and Ron alludes to the paragraph, or not alludes, but mentions 17565D, which is an important paragraph for this one. And I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna share my screen for a second.
Oh, do I need to stop the share?
You got nothing except just let me do it.
Okay.
So if you see this paragraph C, I think this is pretty operational here, or the operating topic. I won't highlight, it's harder to read that way. But if you read this, this is really what I think is precedent here. And I remember us spending a lot of time when Magazzino was built because it was a very tall building, very white, very stark. I want to ask and make sure the applicant has considered that you have minimized the first sentence. The visual impact of storage from public roads shall be minimized. This is not a retail business. Have you, and do we feel, I guess the latter part for our board, but do you, Mr. Applicant, feel like you have minimized the visual impact of the structures? Not reduced, but minimized. I think that's the question I feel is necessary to cover.
I think we've minimized it through the extensive plantings that we're showing along the frontage. And we have put forth, I think, elevations that, while are, I think, more articulated than what you might typically see on a industrial type building. I think it looks a lot nicer than a lot of, what you might see in that vein of architecture. So I think we've put together, a nice presentation in terms of the elevation, but also one that, we're looking to, with color scheme and so on, to not be something that's going to jump out. It's something that's going to blend nicely into the landscape. And so yes, we've looked to push it back to the extent that was reasonable. I think we've presented a facade and an elevation that blends nicely into the landscape, and we've also planted it pretty extensively along the frontage.
But my advice is just consider it a little more on the frontage, because I think it is still, as you said, an industrial building, and it is an area that has a unique mix of residential, commercial, and industrial properties. That's my impression, just to give that a consideration. Okay, and I think, Ron, you had mentioned in your memo about potentially directing you to prepare the Part 2 EAF.
That's correct. As I indicated at the beginning of this discussion, you can acknowledge yourselves to be the lead agency pursuant to seeker. If the board is otherwise prepared to move forward, you want to review the Part 2 of the long form EAF and evaluate potential impacts, which is necessary before you make a seeker declaration. I can prepare that, based on the knowledge we have of the project, and provide that to the board in advance of the next meeting for your review at that meeting.
Well, typically our applicant prepares that. Why are you preparing in this case?
But very often the applicant does prepare it. Part 2 is clearly the board's document, and in this instance, one has not yet been prepared by the applicant. So it's no matter. It's just a matter of having it done, and for the board to review it, accept the answers, and then adopt it as your Part 2.
I have no problem with there. I feel like we'll take a motion to have Ron prepare this Part 2 of the EAF. I have a motion to that effect. Okay, Peter first, Kim second. Any discussion of that? Peter, go ahead.
I just had one question that was brought up earlier, a residence to the east and hoping to mitigate any visual impact that might be deleterious to their house. It's mostly going to be plantings there, and the color of the paint on the building that pretty much is going to be used to address that question.
Well, yeah. So again, it would be the rear elevation that we were showing, and yet, yes, we would have pretty dense evergreen screening, in addition to the deciduous screening that we're maintaining in the rear. And of course, we're open to any suggestion that the board might have with regard to how else that rear elevation might be augmented.
Okay, thank you.
Does that resident know this is happening?
I believe that they do. I believe that they do.
Okay.
All right, we got a motion on the table. Any other comments about the preparing of the Part 2 EAF? Any other comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, anything else, Ron, that we need to cover?
Does the board have any further information they wish to see from the applicant or enhanced architectural information before you consider scheduling a public hearing?
I think
Which is
Kim, I
mandatory.
think Kim did a very good job, and others of adding on clarity about the coloring and the siding of the building, other things.
I
Kim,
just
go
want to say that I don't, I'm sorry, but I don't remember the traffic information, and I'd like to make sure we have information about tractor trailers and things like that coming in. You know, what the size of the trucks are likely to be.
Yeah, with the site plan, we've included again. There was a statement of use, and there's also a table on the site plan. I believe it's on one of the first sheets that breaks out again the intensity of the use, number of trips, and so on. And in addition to that, I also do want to point out that we're showing maneuvers for tractor trailer type vehicles, you know, being able to make it into the site safely, obviously, and make any maneuver that you want it to make and exit the site safely. So that's also available in the site plan set.
For some reason, I thought that was trash removal.
And I'd be remiss to just, you know, not press one more time, just with regard to the possibility of scheduling the public hearing for the March meeting, and with the opportunity to, you know, answer these questions and receive any further questions from the public in March.
Sentiment of the board, any thoughts? Do we feel the application is complete enough for the public to comment? Anybody have any thoughts?
Since
All right,
there
that
isn't,
oh,
I'll say something. So since part 2 of the EAF hasn't been completed, perhaps not.
yeah, I again, as I said, Adam, as I said earlier, I guess it is atypical for our staff. Ron, I hope that's not insulting to call you the staff. You know, for the staff engineer to actually prepare the EAF. So I think Kim makes a good point. There is information in there that is useful for the public to comment, and that would not be in the public record until it's written. So I think that's a reasonable reason to not have it right now, not schedule it yet. Other oppositional views to that?
Neil, I think they've got enough for a public hearing. I do think the DOT is going to have some, going to ask you to modify your north entrance. That looks a little tight, but I think there's enough there for a public hearing.
All right, well, let's take a vote on it then, and we'll see where we come out. Can I have a motion to schedule the public hearing for the next meeting?
So moved.
Okay, a second.
I'll second that.
All right,
I'll second.
Okay, Dennis, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's not passing. All right, so Mr. Thyberg, apologies. I did bring it to the floor of the board, and you heard the sentiment of the majority of the board.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
We'll be
All
back in March. Thank
And
you.
I'm sure, thank you. And guys, again, as I told you, as the former chair of the NPR board used to say, unanimity means we're not doing our job. So I like the fact that we're having some, he's a billionaire, so I like billionaires. Maybe they know some about governance, who knows? Okay, on to the Shakespeare Festival conversation. Cheryl, we have a number of people to let in. So I'm going to state, let's wait till everyone's in. I'll just state what I'd like to try and do tonight. It's 9 o'clock. We've been at this an hour and a half. But I know there's a lot of effort being put behind this and a lot of people. So here's what I see, Mr. Hollis, Mr. McCallum, lots of folks. Okay, so here's what I'd like to suggest we do this evening. And thank you, Mr. Hollis. I think you were at least the sender of said document. Thank you for the responses to our questions. Very helpful. We unfortunately received it on, I believe, Wednesday AM. And as you know, unlike you guys, we are volunteers who most of us have day jobs. So I at least have not had the chance to give it the right attention because I have a day job that takes me from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. usually daily. So I do not have time to read it in great detail. I don't want to speak for my colleagues. I think it would be useful to let you take us through what's in here at some level. We can, I think, certainly happy to spend the next hour. So we're at a 2.5 hour mark this evening, longer than our usual duration, but have you walk us through what's here, and board members ask questions on what they were able to peruse. I was able to read a little bit myself, and I can ask a couple of questions intelligently for a portion of the document, and we'll see how we go. We'll try to give it for an hour, and then we'll dedicate the next time to further reviewing, since I think then the board members will have a chance to read it. As you know, Mr. Hollis, we have a deadline for application materials when the board's packets come out. That is usually the, what is that, Cheryl? That's the Thursday afternoon, a week before the board meeting generally. Maybe it's a week and a half. I'm always forgetting the date.
Yeah,
but
it's 2 weeks, 2 weeks prior.
It's just easier for us to read this stuff because we need, I would speak as a volunteer, we need a weekend to read this stuff. That's when a lot of us do our pro bono jobs. So,
Understood.
okay, so it's not a slight to you in the quality of the work, but it's the chance for all of us to read it again. I don't want to speak for all my fellow board members. So I think an appropriate approach would be for you to tour us through things. Maybe we just go through it linearly and folks can ask questions and we'll get as much as we get done for an hour and so and go from there. Is that a fair approach?
That's very good, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the commentary about our bombing you at the 11th hour. With
Hey, it's good. It's good stuff. You obviously done a lot of work and we appreciate that. You're not bombing us. We can only do so much.
No, I understand that and I appreciate it. As the chairman said, my name's P. Daniel Hollis from the law firm of Hollis, Laidlaw, and Simon in Mount Kisco, and I'm the project attorney. As Mr. Zuckerman also mentioned, we have our entire development team here tonight and the clients, Chip Alleman from the Garrison Properties, Davis McCallum and Kate Lieberman from Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival. What I'd like to do is just pick up where you left off, if I might. That was a very good lead in, and we didn't even rehearse, Mr. Zuckerman, which is the part 2 and the declaring yourself lead agency. I think the lead agency needs to be established because 30 days have certainly elapsed since you circulated your notice of intent. And I think that would be a good first bit of action on your part at some point this evening. Secondly, I'd like to, I'll have each of our consultants who I'll introduce as I call on them to give just a little overview of what they have presented in written fashion. And Mr. Johannesson, our environmental consultant, will talk about the EAF and SECRA a little more than I will. But after we get the lead agency established, I think it would be important to start to do a deep dive into part 2, which we have prepared. And we've actually amended it since the last time. Our submission, we were very religious in following precisely the outline Mr. Gaynor developed for you at the January 28th meeting. As you go through it, you'll notice that we responded in orderly fashion to each point Mr. Gaynor made, as augmented by comments from the public that were made that evening that were in the same category as outlined by Mr. Gaynor. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. The other thing I'd like to make mention of with regard to the EAF that we've amended and submitted, we didn't do part 3, obviously, but we did do a scope or an outline for part 3. And if you sort of read ahead like you do sometimes in a legal decision to see how the judge is going to rule, the outline of part 3 will be very helpful, I think, for the board to establish the order of march, so to speak, as we evaluate the environmental aspects of this project. The submission, as I mentioned, was very religious to that, following Mr. Gaynor's outline. We don't have any further outline from him. Mr. Gaynor, chime in at any point if you want to correct me or Mr. Gaba on any of the points I'm making. I think I'll do a brief introduction. Our landscape architect from Nelson, Bird and Waltz was Lainey McKinnon. And perhaps Lainey could put a screen, if she could share her screen, Mr. Chairman. And you'll see our team, the spelling of their names, et cetera. We have also John Canning, our traffic engineer from Kimberly Horn. Jan Johannesson from Kellard Sessions is our environmental consultant. Yame Solar is our acoustical expert. The ever-present Glenn Watson from Badey and Watson, our civil engineers. And I don't think I've left anybody out as far as our experts at this point now. I think that what I'd like to do is, since what I've asked you to take a look at is the secret process, to have Mr. Johannesson just speak briefly about that, and then we'll go to Mr. Canning to speak briefly as to what he submitted for traffic, and Mr. If you would like at any point to interrupt, we can have Ms. McKinnon go through the site plan. If there are operational aspects of the plan, Mr. McCallum or Ms. Lieberman can provide that information. We're fully prepared to answer any and all questions. And I think as each person begins their presentation, Glenn Watson, of course, will talk about any of the site plan issues involving stormwater, water and septic issues. So with that, you see that's all of our names there. And Mr. Johannesson, if you would just like to take over for a minute and speak about the secret process and how in a perfect world you think that that should go forward from this date on.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Jan Johannesson from Kellard Sessions Consulting. We're the environmental planner on the project, and we're responsible for preparing the Part 1 EAF and Part 2 EAF that been submitted to your board, as well as the Part 3 EAF outline. As this is a type 1 action under SECRA, we were required to prepare the full environmental assessment form. And we use the EAF, DEC EAF mapper and the EAF workbook to complete those forms, to assist us in completing those forms. And at the last meeting, you had gone through Part 1 and Part 2 and provided some first cut comments. And we've gone through those documents and responded to those comments, revised the EAF Parts 1 and 2 and submitted it back to the board. And just for your edification, Part 1 is really intended to provide like a concise description of the whole action and provide basic data about the site. And Part 2 goes into 18 different environmental categories of interest and helps the lead agency, the planning board, in determining the range of possible impacts and helps to assess their magnitude. So I don't know if the board wants to go through that in any additional detail this evening. I know we went through it once at the last meeting, and we did make the changes that were requested. And as Dan mentioned, we did not prepare the Part 3, but my office prepared, really based on Mr. Gaynor's outline, the items that we feel are appropriate and applicable to analyze in the Part 3.
So Mr. Johansson, here's what we're going to do. Just I wanted to state this. A document was submitted to us which has lots and lots and lots of red text, which answered our questions. It arrived yesterday morning. So I guarantee most of us have not either read it in a cursory fashion, certainly not read in a detailed fashion. So we're going to need time to read that stuff. Yep. After we digest that stuff, and I'm happy to have you guys, all of your different specialties, talk about what you wrote to get us ready to read it and digest it. We're then going to, after we get through all that, and we ask you questions about it, then we're going to have a session where we actually go through the EAF Part 2 in detail. Right. And since it's our document that you kindly author, but it's our document, we're going to, like we've done before, we're going to go point by point, and Kim, I think, started previewing this. Each of us are going to go point by point about the issues we feel. And we're going to debate and discuss with you about where we think it should go and what language. When that's done, I think we'll be done with the EAF Part 2. And then we can go from there. But I think for tonight's purpose, just being practical, you guys can edify anything you want in that document, because again, I'm not going to call my colleagues to do a test who did their homework. But the homework was, we got it too late for, I think, for any of us to fairly have a detailed sense. So if you want to tour us for any of the red text of all the questions that were answered, that's awesome. And I think that's a fair thing for us to accomplish tonight. But I think it's not, I don't think we're going to be ready to have digested everything you gave us as we received it less than 48 hours ago.
I think if each of our consultants can just then highlight the greatest hits, so to speak, from each of the submissions.
Perfect, Dan.
That would
That's
be
fantastic. That's fantastic. We're on the same sheet.
So Jan, if you could just point out what you think the most significant response we made and how we handled that.
Yeah, Dan, I'm not sure I'm the appropriate person to go through those items. I can absolutely go through the pieces I put together in the part 2 and the part 3, and what I feel are the important items to analyze.
What we'll do, maybe if Lainey could just put up the overall, the general site plan, and we'll have Glenn Watson talk a bit about the site plan and any changes that are different based on the reaction. And then after that, Mr. Canning could be on deck to talk about traffic, and Mr. Soleil about acoustical issues. I think that might be a good order of march. And then questions that the board might have can be addressed to that person who made the presentation of what they feel is the most important point they want to make to you as you prepare yourselves to go through it chapter and verse. And then and Ms. McKinnon is here throughout on any site plan issues. All right, Glenn, is there anything you want to add, talk about on the site plan that different from the last time, or that we've expanded upon?
The site plan really hasn't changed since the last time, nor has any of the supporting engineering plans that we submitted. But we did take a serious look at a lot of stuff and a lot of the questions that were raised either by Mr. Gaynor or by comments from the public, and that were picked up and written down at the site walk. What we concentrated on physically, as opposed to in the comments, we've just today finished a tree survey, where we located every tree 8 inches or larger within the anticipated disturbance and within 50 feet of the anticipated disturbance. So that was one physical thing. The discussions that I concentrated on were basically the general characteristics of the property and the visual impacts that might happen from various spots, on each side of the property. And I provided a discussion as to what those impacts might be, where they are at their worst, where they are at their least, and what in the case of the more difficult sites, discussion of what Lainey McKinnon's plan has provided by way of impact, and what other impact, by way of impact mitigation, what other and other things that would mitigate the visual impacts. There was a number of questions regarding the septic systems and how they relate to the wells and how they relate to water supply. And there's a discussion in there about how, from our office, that how you select a septic system, what you do with regard to the wells. We have 9 wells on site. We'll probably end up having 11 when we're all said and done. That's discussed, and why that's discussed, and how the septic systems are located to protect the wells, and what's done to test for them, and what has been done so far with regard to the testing. Of course, we started that program, but we got snowed out. The health department won't come out with a snow cover like that. I would call them wimps, but they can only get me out in April and May. So, and it was a similar discussion with regard to drainage. There was a concern about whether or not we could handle the drainage and what our object is in handling the drainage, and that was discussed There was a discussion with regard to rock and whether there would be blasting. And that focuses around the grading that Lane and McKinnon basically did, and we I wouldn't say refined it, but we more mathematized it, I guess is the better word for what we did. And you could see that she followed the grade of the ground as much as she could, and within certain specifications to make sure the roads work. So there are cuts and fills, but they're not very deep. And we compared that to the soil maps, and which show that we have very deep soils that we're having to deal with. So we've demonstrated that we have a pretty good mix of that. And I did let that discussion go into we couldn't deny that we might hit some blasting requirements, but there's a number of steps you go through first. And we answered the question as to how we would mitigate any impacts from blasting should it be required. We're hopeful that it won't. And little tidbits here and there that I don't think are as much of a highlight of this treatise as some of the other things. So I'll pass it on.
All right, thank you, Glenn. I think that a point of interest for nearly everyone is traffic, and John Canning probably will take up most of our remaining time to present to you what his report says in highlighted fashion, and then Mr. Soleil can speak about acoustics lastly, and then we'll be available, each and all of us, to respond to anything else. John, are you around?
Thank you, Dan. Sorry, I was on mute so that I wouldn't be disturbing the meeting earlier. Good evening, everybody. And I hope that I don't take up the bulk of the remainder of the time. I do want to thank the board and the public for their input so far, because it has been very instructive. I have two goals from talking with you this evening. Number one, I want to make sure when you read this document that we have incorporated all of the concerns that you have, because we want to make sure that we address them all. Because if we don't, we'll only have to address them later, and we don't want to do that. I'd also like to take a couple of minutes sort of to set up what the impact of this project is, so that when you review the comments and think about it, you'll have some context. Obviously, the Garrison was approved in 2005 for a whole bunch of stuff, and a good portion of it was built. In our traffic study, we're comparing what the Garrison will be in the future with the uses that have been requested to what is approved in the 2005 approval. We're evaluating the traffic impacts from the worst case scenario. Basically, everything is operational at the same time. The indoor theater, the outdoor theater, the banquet, the restaurant, and the golf, and the hotel. I don't think I've missed anything there. So I want you to understand that we're doing a very conservative analysis. If all of these activities are operating at the level that we're evaluating in our study, it'll happen maybe 5 or 6 times a year. I know that there are only 28 days a year when both the indoor and the outdoor theaters are scheduled to have double performances, or hoped to have double performances, which is what we've studied. So that's kind of the context. We're listening to you. We're doing a very conservative study. The items that we have specifically heard you mention, I'll highlight the most important ones as I see them. There are some other little ones, but if you think I've missed a major one, you bring it to my attention. Number one is Snake Hill Road. Snake Hill Road at the driveway that goes into the golf course, Snake Hill Road on the back side or the west side, site distances, pretty much everything to do with Snake Hill Road. We heard you. Traffic within the property, how that will operate safely with all of these people driving and walking around the campus. Parking, how much parking will you need? Philipsbrook Road driveway, should that be open, should that not be open? The intersection of Snake Hill Road with Traverse Corners Road and Route 9, what can be done to make that work for Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival and for everybody? Turn lanes, particularly at the Route 9 driveway, but also at the Snake Hill Road driveway. And as I mentioned before, basically what's going to happen on this campus or on this property when it is if presuming it is approved and when it's fully operational, everybody's fully operational. We've actually provided you with some good information in there, but I would like to point out it will be basically a cultural and entertainment and arts campus, and as such it will be managed as a venue. So you'll have scheduling and pre-planning and event planning, but all of that is what we're going to discuss in our study, and we've put it all in there for you to consider. And then please, tell us where we're missing stuff, or tell us where you'd like more stuff. But I think that's it for me at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Jamie, would you like to jump in a little bit on the acoustics?
Yes, absolutely, Daniel. So I'm Jaume Soler with Sound Arts Consulting. In the previous meeting, there was a few questions about noise impacts. And right now we are in the process of building an acoustical model of the site. And in that model, we'll be introducing all the potential noise sources and quantifying the acoustical impacts in all the residences around the site. We put together a couple of slides that I think that would be helpful to show. I think it's slides 9 and 10. One thing that I wanted to mention, and it's in one of the responses, is that in the last 34 years at Boscobel, there have not been any noise complaints about performances at that location. And we are talking about residences located at similar distances at the Garrison site. So in this slide, you can see the Boscobel location. You can see the center of the circle, that would be the location of the tent. And then you can see a 1,000 feet circle, and you can see some residences that are within that circle, right? And then some of them slightly beyond that. If we go to the Garrison plan, you can see that in this case, all the residences are outside this circle. So the anticipated level should be slightly lower than what the residents obviously inside the circle are. So we don't anticipate any acoustical impacts or any complaints, but anyway, that will be what the model will be showing and quantifying. That will be, we will be presenting that in a future meeting.
Thank you. We
Dan?
haven't made any changes to the site plan itself because we didn't want to change the site plan until we were certain where the planning board wanted us to go. So the plan you have before you is the plan you've seen before. We haven't changed it. Everything is still in process, as Mr. Soler just mentioned. Are there any questions from any members of the board of any of us, starting with the clients, to me, to the people who have put together the bulk of the report?
Yeah, Dan, let me just take over for a second here. So because I think we can do questions. I do think there's two topics that are important, and maybe we'll just start with Ron to give us any staging questions to include rescheduling our second site visit that we did not get to do because of the snow. So Ron, questions you want, or topics you want to clarify for us? Ron, you're on mute still.
Thank you. Yeah, at this point, as you indicate, the materials have just come in, so I'm just in the process of trying to get through it myself. I would have nothing more to offer for tonight's meeting.
Okay, so I assume the sentiment of the group is to also reschedule the site visit that we missed given the weather and given this is not the same as our 2 applications ago where we can just walk up the driveway and look and say, okay. So the snow is an issue. And so I just want to gather from this group, do we think we should schedule it now, or should we wait till April when we know we actually can walk on it? Thoughts from the board, that is. Kim, go ahead.
I mean, I think, we could schedule it in April, and that since it is a lot to walk, I'm not sure it's materially, I think there's plenty for us to talk about without having to see the lower area.
I think it's good. I think we're gonna end up canceling. It is gonna be hard to traverse that terrain, but I'll take any counter arguments and we can take a vote.
May I speak?
Can I let the board first finish, Glenn, and then I'll come to you?
Okay.
Any other board members have any comments on that? Opinions? Okay, Glenn, go ahead.
I fully understand that it's going to be a difficult thing walking in the snow, but I think that if you schedule the meeting, that say the following Sunday, following the one you just scheduled earlier tonight, and you had to cancel it because it was still snow on the ground, we would feel much better than if we went by that date and the ground was clear.
Yeah, I look, Glenn, I always admire that you want to get stuff on the calendar. I like that, and if I were in your shoes, I'd do the same. But I'm happy to take a vote of the board. Is anyone in favor of scheduling a site visit at this point for within the next 4 weeks? Glenn, Dennis, you all right?
Yeah. I have no problem with scheduling for the following Sunday with the intent that if we cannot make it because of weather conditions, that we just table it out again, just to get it on a schedule.
Okay. So I'd like a motion, and Glenn, Dennis, I'll assume you'll be the first. You'll be my first to move. A motion to schedule a site visit, and we'll talk about the date in a second. So can I have a motion for that?
I'll make that motion.
All right, second.
I'll second it. Thank you.
Okay. Heidi and Neil, I'll give it to Heidi. She had her hand up first, or at least I saw her head. All in favor of scheduling a site visit, or second version of this? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Good. Okay, good. We got it. All right. Opposed, abstention. So we got it. We'll do it. I think we will have to push it out as far as we can between the next visit. So why don't we try? Should we do March 14th then? So
Sure,
we'll put it
that's
out
fine.
there. We'll put it out there for March 14th for that area we discussed, which would be the northern and lower sections that we did not get to. Davis, you were a fantastic tour guide last time. We looked to your height and your voice and your projection to guide us again. You never knew that all that training as an actor would be so good for site visits. So well done. Okay. And Mr. Hollis reminded us about lead agency. We already did declare our intention. So Ron, what do we have to do with that related to that, since we didn't hear back? Do we need to validate that? Ron, you're on mute.
Thanks again. Yeah, you can merely just acknowledge it tonight, as Mr. Hollis indicates here. The 30-day period for outside agencies to comment has long since expired.
Acknowledge meaning we don't need a vote for it, or do we need a vote, Steve? You need a vote?
Need a vote. You're automatically lead agency.
That's what I thought.
But you can put it on the record, just say, you know,
Okay.
it's been 30 days, we're now officially lead agency.
Okay, well, you just said it, Steve.
I think you should say it to the chairman.
Okay, I will acknowledge that nothing has been received. Does everyone feel good with that acknowledgement? Okay. All right, thank you very much. So look, I could go into, so let's pause there. So board members, we could easily spend the next half hour, and I'm totally fine for that, asking questions. I'm happy to open up the floor. I'm sure people have some questions when they read. This is not your only bite at the apple. You got a barrel of apples. So if you have questions you'd like to ask from some of the material that was submitted, great. If you need time to digest all the material that was given, you have the next few weeks to do that. So I'm open the floor to anyone who wants to ask any questions to get it started. Kim, please, go ahead.
Okay. So here are just some questions to add to, what you're going to tell us next time. From the original PDD, what got built and what didn't get built? Because there were a lot of things that were in there that were supposed to get built that may or may not have gotten built, from septic systems to the hotel, things like that. So it just and ideally in like a table form, like these are the things we were going to have and these are the things that happened. Along with that, I'd like to know how the addition to the Garrison Golf Club building, which was built sometime in the last 5 years, I think, how that relates to the PDD. Because I don't remember reading anything in the PDD about the size of the building, only about things like hotel rooms and the hotel. So I'd just like to know how that fits into the whole picture. I'd like to have we may have a drawing like this, but I'd like to have some kind of drawing that shows us where the new plan is in relationship to the core area that's in the PDD. As far as lodging goes, there's a discussion about seasonal lodging. I'm assuming, I'd like to have it confirmed that seasonal refers to the theater season as opposed to spring, summer, fall, winter, because it's when I think seasonal, I think it's a summer cabin. And I suspect that you mean something different if things are going to be occupied all year. The PD, again, with the what got built, what didn't, the PDD mentions 4 septic systems. Do they exist? I'd like to know how you control family occupancy because it's calculated as 3 people in a family situation. I'm just wondering if some families are bigger, so if that's going to increase the number. I'd like to know what happened to the 4 managers' cottage rooms, if they ever got built, if they exist. When I count up the number of people that would be staying in lodging, with the 2-bedroom family, the 1-bedroom, the 2-bedroom, the new inn, and the existing inn, assuming each room that's in the inn is a 2-person room as opposed to a 4-person room, as say a Holiday Inn would have, I come up with 98 people in 54 rooms. I'd just like to confirm that. It seems like there's an overall decrease in water usage. I'd just like that confirmed. But there would be an increase in septic usage because there will be people who will be on site using the facilities who will not be staying in the hotel. So I'd just like to know a little more about that. And then on page 29 of the EAF under J8, it talks about pedestrian and bicycle accommodations, and I'd just like to know what those are. And that's all I have for tonight.
If I could answer 2 things for you, Ms. Connor, if you'd like.
Sure.
With regard to the seasonal, the artists will be there for the period of their engagement. So you're right. It's not the spring, fall, summer, winter. It's the season of that particular production. That's number one. And also in the materials, you'll note that the clients are willing to restrict length of stay for other than artists in residence during the period of their engagement. So that to take away the fear that those cottages could turn into rental units for year-round use by a family. So that could be, we're willing to have that be a condition of approval when hopefully you get there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, other board members? Peter, go ahead, please. Peter, go ahead.
Just had one question about the open space. Whether or not you were considering to have a maximum number of visitors to the independent park, and if there was going to be any type of enforcement of that, so that we might be able to preclude something that happened like at Constitution Marsh some years ago. And I think otherwise my questions were answered. So that's all I wanted you to consider in the next round.
Yes, we are very aware of marshaling and controlling visitors other than patrons for the shows during the time of the shows. So there'll be a plan that we will have for you to discuss and evaluate how we'll manage that. That's already under consideration.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Others? Okay, so I was able to read, I'll just ask a couple of questions. I was able to read the 2-page traffic document, which was very helpful. And Mr. Canning, it's nice to see you again. Just when you thought you would escaped our clutches. You're back with us. So, who thought things could get more complicated than 53-foot trucks? But it does. So,
No, my pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
well, you know what? At least one of us is being paid to be here. That's good. All right. So let me ask a couple of questions on this, and in particular this table. And I appreciate you inviting questions. It is helpful, but there are a few pieces I'd like to clarify. And I as Mr. Hollis correctly identified, traffic is and will be a significant source of questions we'll have over the next periods of meetings. So a couple of things. One, I don't see a row for the park that Mr. Lewis was alluding to. I don't see anything for the traffic that the park will create. People
Right.
will obviously not be walking across Route 9 to go to the park. They'll have to get there somehow. I don't see any allocation for the
Yep.
park, nor do I see any allocation for those in the 15 houses. Maybe you already have it as part of the hotel row, but I don't see a row for the houses.
It's in the hotel row.
Okay.
I haven't put rooms in there, but it is in. You see down where it says hotel, it says HVSF staff above,
Yes.
and there's 60.
Yes.
So that's in there. The park, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. The next is that, so that's rows. In terms of some numbers, just well, there's an absence of a number of buses. You have guests for buses, but you don't have the vehicles of buses that are turning in and out to drop off these people.
Sure. Based on conversations with Mr. Allen, it is typically about 2 buses, and it's
Okay,
usually associated with the weddings.
Right,
And-
but buses are also not, 15 feet in length. So that
Correct. That's
yeah,
correct.
So,
Yep.
so we just need some allocation of the bus
got it.
traffic.
Yep.
Then, look, I had and some of you were there, I had my older daughter's bat mitzvah at the Garrison, and we sure had a hell of a lot more than 112 people on a Saturday afternoon. Never mind the weddings I see going on at the Garrison on the weekend. And maybe that's the average run rate that Chip sees, but I've been to enough events at the Garrison over the many years that 112 seems like a light number of guests. And maybe I had a very, very highly attended event, and the bill certainly matched that attendance level. Chip, thank you very much for that. But that seems like a low number, 112.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, as Chip has indicated, there's a range, but from the traffic perspective, and also Glenn, correct me, from the water sewer perspective, whether or not there's a range, we're looking at what the expected maximum attendance is. So from traffic, I've looked at 200 seats in the banquet facility because we're proposing to reduce the seating capacity from 232 down to 200. For the restaurant, I've considered 72 seats because that's its capacity. And for the venues, I've considered, I think it's 530 and 225. So your point is well taken, but we are and we will be looking at the maximum attendance.
And I need you to, but remember, there's not only the main hall where we have our dinners usually for the Garrison events, but you also have the reception hall to the west. So I just want you to be, because we are trying to figure out for the maximum, tied to what my colleague, Mr. Toman, said last time, not too big, not too much, and not too ugly. So let me continue. The restaurant, you've got 50 people, 16 plus 34 at the restaurant. In the summer, which is what we're worried about, when the indoor is going, an indoor theater, the outdoor theater, golf, weddings, restaurants, hotels, and park, you have 50 people going to the restaurant. Now, I know we're doing it the maximum, but I've been to that restaurant late at night, in the bar, outside and inside, and 50 is a bad night, especially when we're going to have all these hundreds and hundreds of people who want to come to Chip's restaurant now. They'll be banging down the door. So I'd like us to make sure we have a reasonable assessment of how many people at the restaurant.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, because thank you. So what the assumption that we made, and we may make an adjustment, is that if you've got 6 things there, you're never going to have all 6 things 100% occupied at the same time. It's just practically not going to happen. So we said, let's look at what is the most likely worst case. And we can make an adjustment based on your recommendation. We said, let's assume that the night that you've got the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival is fully at capacity for its 2 performances in the afternoon. Oh, that's a Friday night. So it's 2 performances on a Friday night. It's at full capacity. The hotel is at full capacity. We said the golf on a Friday night is down low. And we said that the banquet was at 80% and the restaurant was at 70%. And overall, of the 100% number, we get to 93%. Actually, it's 95% on Friday and it's 94% on Saturday. So we're at 94% of the maximum number of people possible you could cram into the facility, believing that we won't get any higher than that because everything doesn't always peak at the same time. If you think that needs to be adjusted, when you give us your comments, just let us know what you think it will be, and we'll make that.
I think we're trying to worry about the maximum, and so let me get to my last point. Then is so just doing some simple division.
Yeah.
It seems like you're using 2.79 occupants per car.
It depends on the day, Mr. Chairman. We got data from an event source that we have, and I think it's 2.5 on a Friday and 2.7 on a Saturday.
Well,
and
just doing the division, it was 2.79 was your average. Now,
correct.
I went to 2 websites.
Yep.
One is from the University of Michigan,
Yep.
Traffic analysis, and one is from the federal government. They said the averages were 1.5 and 1.7. Now, your numbers get dramatically different. You get 611 cars at a 1.7 versus 384 cars at a 2.79. That's a big difference.
Yes, it is.
And I understand that the argument would be, well, you're going to bring your mother or your aunt or cousin with you in the car. I get that. But as I work in business and do a lot of assumptions work, your assumption is very sensitive. That 2.7, whatever you use for the average passenger, is very sensitive, especially since the EAF has a magic number of 500 as being one of those questions. Do you have more than 500 cars? So we have to have a real good discussion about what is the average number of human beings, because I just saw 2 sites using the power of Google that tell me 1.5 to 1.7 is the number, and you got something that's more than one whole extra person. So those are my comments from this 2-page document, and I appreciate you listening.
And I do that last comment in particular, I do appreciate, because that's something that we'll have to get back to you on.
Most certainly. Okay, Mr. Hollis, other things you want to talk about tonight?
No, I think we've made some pretty good progress. I think that you're a volunteer board. I've been on a board, number of volunteer boards, and it's a great service, and we appreciate what you do. But we're willing, my team is willing to participate in special meetings if you think that's more important, to devote blocks of time so that you don't get overtired because you've had 3 things before us, and we can focus on the issues to drive this thing towards a decision, whatever that decision may be.
And I think Mr. Hollis, we're trying to balance again that we have day jobs, and so I think we obviously we've had 1 special meeting already. I'm sure we will have more, but we can't have a separate track. We're going to meet every month on this in parallel. Then we're really up a creek. So,
no, I just want to. It's a standing volunteer.
No, and we're with you. Here's what I'd like to suggest though. For the next meeting, I will start with you guys. So you'll be first up, so we'll be fresher. And we will then, the board will have a chance to have read all the material, and then we can go through all our questions, and then that will be done. And then after that, we'll then take up the detailed review of the EAF part 2, so we can get through that. But we got to get our questions answered first. So I think that would be a fair assignment for us. And board members, any other questions?
Just want to remind everybody of the deadline 2 weeks before the meeting, so that we don't end up in the same situation.
Well, I think we've given you enough for this trip. We have a few more things and we'll get them into you as quickly as possible. But I think that what we've provided will provide you ample reading material, and we've answered an awful lot of questions in that submission. Not all of them, but an awful lot of them.
You've given us good homework. Ron or Steve, any parting comments?
I have nothing.
No, I think we've set things up well for next month's meeting. I don't think you're going to be in a position to go through the EAF part 2 at next month's meeting. Maybe the board will surprise me and be more energetic. I think there's just more
I
than
beg
enough
your
for-
pardon, sir. This is a board with great energy,
just
and vim and
I-
vigor.
Look, if you can get to it, that's great. I just think you have enough to process and enough questions after that before you actually start trying to provide answers to those checklist of items in the part two. But we'll see. That's my take on it.
I was impressed by the vitality, so I'm betting on the board.
All right, board members, any parting
Hope you're right.
questions? Parting thoughts? Okay, a motion to adjourn then, please. Peter? Second, Laura, thank you very much. Okay, ladies and
Thank you,
gentlemen, have a good couple weeks. We'll see you at the March walk if all
Night, everyone.
goes well. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.